Hello everyone, welcome to SD's Chess World and I hope you're having a great day. Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, who takes his second title this year, that is Grenke Chess Classic title 2018, and he wins this tournament with 6.5 points in 9 rounds, where he didn't lose a single game. He has 4 wins and 5 draws over there. And considerable thing is here that Grandmaster and World Chess Champion Magnus is also a participant for this tournament, and he goes with 5.5 points. Fabiano Caruana, who is a winner of FIDE candidate chess title and going to challenge Magnus in November for World Chess Championship. And in today's video we are going to see his match against Grandmaster Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who is a great player and he defeated Grandmaster and former World Chess Champion Viswanathan Anand in this tournament. So before going to it, don't forget to subscribe the channel and show your support. Now we have done that, let's go for the game. Maxime has a white pieces and Fabi has a black pieces. So Maxime starts with c4 English opening and Fabi replied with e5 and knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3 and knight to c6. Now converting into the 4 knight variation, where these 4 knights are controlling the center. g3, here Maxime trying for bishop to j2 and castling. Fabi goes for bishop to b4, attacking on the knight and ready to castle. Bishop to j2, Maxime don't mind to exchange knight with the bishop, and here black castles and white castles. e4, now attacking on this knight, going on e1 square is not a good option, so it goes on knight to g5. Here these 2 knights are attacking on this pawn on e4, so bishop takes on c3 and pawn takes on c3. Rook to e8, protecting this pawn since there are 2 attackers, that is bishop and knight, and this pawn is protected by this knight and the rook. Queen to c2, adding attacker on this pawn, and here Fabi goes for d5, protecting the pawn. Maxime takes this opportunity and remove his double pawn. He takes the pawn on d5 and queen takes the pawn on d5. This pawn has now 3 attackers and 3 defenders, but now this queen is attacking on this knight, so Maxime goes for d3, and I like this move especially because now here this bishop is protecting this knight, also pawn is attacking on e4 and black can't take this pawn because this queen is hanging. Bishop to b5, adding protector to the pawn, and bishop to f4, attacking on this unprotected c7 pawn. h6, now attack on this knight, so knight takes the pawn on e4, and now bishop takes the knight on e4, and here there are several moves possible for white. It can go for c4, but queen can move to e3, and if pawn takes the knight then bishop will take the pawn, and here white have to exchange the pieces. Bishop take the bishop on e4, queen will take the bishop, queen will take the bishop, and rook will take the queen, and bishop will definitely take this pawn and rook will take this pawn. As you can see the board here, pieces are same on the board. Black has this knight and white has this bishop, but white has these 2 hanging pawns which are not connected and they are dependent on rooks and the bishop. Or else white can go for exchange directly. Pawn takes the knight, then bishop will take the pawn, bishop will take the bishop, queen will take the bishop, queen will take the queen, and rook will take the queen, and same continues. Bishop will take the pawn and rook will take the pawn. Since black is better here, so Maxime goes for different move, and that is queen to b2, and this is quite different move which is Fabi is not considering, as this queen is now attacking on this b7 pawn and bishop is attacking on the c7 pawn. Fabi goes for b6 and allowing this bishop to take this pawn, but if bishop takes this pawn then rook to c8 attacking on the bishop, and bishop have to come back, and this rook has activity now and controlling over the c file. Instead of going for that, Maxime goes for rook f to d1, and having an idea, after pawn takes this knight, rook can threaten this queen, but Fabi avoid it with queen to c5, and here pawn takes the knight on e4, bishop takes on e4, bishop, and here Maxime can't exchange this bishop. If he tries to exchange, then rook takes the bishop, and now this rook on 8th rank is ready to come to e8, and this pawn is under attack. So bishop to f1, and this bishop is now protecting this pawn on e2 as well as protecting this diagonal. Rook to e7. Now Fabi is ready to take this rook on e8, doubling this rook and marching on this pawn. a4 by Maxime. Since this rook on a1 don't have activity, Maxime tries to open some square for it. Rook a to e8, doubling this rook, and this rook are now controlling on this e file. Rook to c1, giving some activity to the rook. g5 attacking on the bishop. Here bishop to e3 move is not played by Maxime, where it can threaten this queen. He goes for bishop to d2, and as you can see here, this rook are not doing anything. They are protecting the bishop here, and also this all the pieces of white are not doing anything, and white has very active pieces here. After that, queen to f5 by Fabi, targeting on this f3 by Maxime, and this can be called as the mistake, because after this there is a beautiful moves possible for the black. Fabi takes the queen on c5 with check, and here Maxime have to select either on h1 square or g2 square, and Maxime choose king to h1, and that is the best square for it. If he go for king to g2, then it is going to be a disaster, because bishop will take the pawn on f3 now, and since this queen is covering this diagonal, this bishop must be taken either by this pawn or by this king. Let's try with pawn. If pawn takes this bishop, then rook to e2, check, sacrificing the rook. Bishop takes the rook, and again rook takes the bishop with check. f1 square is not good for white, because queen to f2 is going to be checkmate, so it will go to h1, and after queen to f2 it is impossible to stop this checkmate, that is queen takes on h2. Now let's check if king take the bishop on f3, then queen to g1, and this move is really good move, because it is restricting this king to come back, and open king on f3 is really dangerous. Here white can try for bishop to h3 by attacking this queen by the rook, but knight to e5 is dangerous. Here this knight is controlling on this 2 square, queen is controlling on this 3 squares, and this pawn is controlling this square, so king have only 1 square to go, that is king to e4, and after knight goes back to c6, king have to decide whether to go. Going on this 2 square is really dangerous, because if king to d5, then queen to c5 with checkmate, and if king goes on f5 square, then queen to f2, check, king goes to g4, rook to e4 with check, king goes to h5, and now rook to h4 with check. Since this rook is protected by the pawn, so pawn have to take the rook, and after that queen takes the pawn on h4 with checkmate. Only safe square for king here is that d3 square. So these are the possible moves, but here Maxime choose his base move, that is king to h1. Here Fabiano takes his bishop back on d5 and bishop to d1, trying for this bishop to f2 and attacking on this queen. Bishop to c4, now this triple attack on this pawn. Here Maxime pushes e4, allowing bishop on c4 to take this bishop on f1, and Fabi takes the bishop on f1 and bishop to f2 by Maxime attacking on this queen, where this bishop is protected by this queen, and also attacking on this bishop. So queen goes to c4 and rook takes the bishop on f1 and queen takes the pawn on a4. Here black has this two extra connected pawn over the white. c4 by Maxime, and knight to e5 attacking on this pawn, and bishop to d4. Now here you can say that this knight to d3 attacking on the queen and this rook is going to be a disaster for white, but no, here white can simply goes for c2 and now attacking on this unprotected queen. So queen have to take, otherwise this knight will fall. Queen takes the queen on c2 and rook will take the queen on c2, and it is going to be okay for white. So instead of this, Fabi goes for g4 attacking on this pawn. Maxime takes the pawn on g4, and here queen to d7 attacking on this pawn, and also this queen is protected, and queen to c3 making queen active on this third rank, also taking it to the protection with rook, and c5 attacking on this bishop, and Maxime have to decide either to go back on this diagonal or have to take this knight. Actually Fabi forcing him to take the knight. Maxime takes the knight on e5 and rook takes the bishop on e5. Black is very better. He has this two pawn which can go for promotion, and queen to f3. Now going for some ideas like taking this pawn if queen moves. Rook takes the unprotected e4 pawn here, and rook c to d1 attacking on this queen. Queen to a6. Now double rook and queen pair, which is very strong, and aiming on this e1 square for this king. Here Maxime type g5, h takes on g5 and rook to d5, having some idea like rook takes the pawn and attacking on this king. Also this queen can support here, but g4 attacking on this queen. So Maxime goes for queen to c3, keeping same idea, taking rook to g5 attacking on the king, and also going for this queen to h8 square. But here rook to e5, and after this move Maxime resigns the game. Is it too early? No, actually, because here black will simply try to exchange the pieces and try to force this pawn to move ahead for the promotion. If white can go by taking this rook, but after that queen will take the rook, queen will take the queen, and rook will take the rook on e5 square. And as you can see, this pawn is unprotected also, and also if rook tries on f4 square, but still rook can go for g5 square protecting this pawn also. Here this pawn are unstoppable. Black king can simply come to the game easily, but white have to go for long path here. And if they don't exchange here, if Maxime goes for rook d to d1, then black will simply goes to rook to e2, and this queen is going for this attack. This rook is protected by this rook, and king is safe in the corner here. So on this position, after rook to e5, Maxime resigns the game. Really nice game played by Fabi. I hope you like this video. If yes, then go ahead, hit the like button and subscribe the channel. Share this video with your friends, and you can watch my previous videos here. Go ahead, stay in touch with me on the social sites, and thank you so much for watching this. I will see you in the next one. Thank you.